Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, October 3rd, 2013. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Andy Sparks and I visit the new home of the Ozark Beer Company in Rogers, Arkansas. We talk to founder Andy Coates, and we sample some home brews to talk about the different styles and techniques to brew them. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can find me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. Our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're also on Google Plus as well. And thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how that works. When you think of going to Amazon and shopping on Amazon, don't go directly to Amazon. Go to basicbrewing.com. Click on our Amazon ad. That will take you to Amazon where you can shop as you normally do. The only difference is that we'll get a chunk of what you buy, and it won't cost you any extra. How much good is that? Many good. That's right. Another. I don't know where I was going with that. I've got another chapter in the Amazon link story. Last time I told you not to make a bookmark for the link after telling you to make a bookmark for the link in the previous show. Well, this week, listener Todd up in Portland, Oregon, bought an item through a bookmark as a test, and it showed up on the list of items purchased through our link in our little control panel or whatever. So, at least for Todd's item, it worked to use a bookmark. So, thanks, Todd. I don't know if it works for every item, but it certainly worked for Todd's. And I'm gonna mention his item at the end of the show. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes and our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, and we're on the Stitcher app, too. We're on the Windows Phone directory as well. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front of the book is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And there's room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. And handy, there's a table of contents, a blank table of contents in the front. So you don't have to search for your recipes anymore. They're all right there. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar and some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks very much to everybody who's done so. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com. If you haven't listened to last week's show yet, do so that you can participate in the experiment on the effect of water chemistry on hoppy beers. I won't go into details here, but Chris Colby has written up a good explanation of the experiment on beerandwinejournal.com, and I plan to brew mine tomorrow, so looking forward very much to that. I haven't brewed a big old hoppy beer in a long time, so I bought the ingredients, and I'm ready to do that. There is a new Basic Brewing video episode out there since the last Basic Brewing radio episode. In last week's BBV, Steve Wilkes and I sample his smoked peach ale. I wouldn't have paired smoke with peach, but Steve did, and it was tasty. It's a fun little episode to do. Beautiful weather sitting out on Steve's porch. I want to move on because we've spent a lot of time talking in the interview part, and I do want to let you know that I am still answering email on a one-to-one basis, and I'm saving up letters to read on the show for when we have time to do so. So even if I'm not reading the letters here on the episode, I am enjoying reading them, and I am I'm corresponding. I'm responding, corresponding. I'm actually doing it in a fairly timely manner lately, so I need to keep that up. Anyway, I need to watch my timer more closely when I'm recording so I can have some time to get some letters in. Instead, I'm just rambling. I could have read a letter just then. In the time that it took for me to tell you that I'm not going to read any letters, I could have read a letter. Anyway, in the meantime, let's head up to Rogers, Arkansas, in the formerly dry Benton County, where Andy Coates and his wife Lacey are setting up shop as the Ozark Beer Company. Andy Sparks and I got to see the new space a couple weeks ago, and we took some time to sample some homebrews and talk about what went in to putting them together. Well, Andy Coates, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We're the dueling Andys. Andy Sparks is also here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Where are we, Andy Coates?
We're up here in Benton County, and Roger's here at our startup brewery at Ozark Beer Company. Right now, it
looks kind of like a warehouse with a brewery sitting off on the side of it. This is I think going to be a nice location. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I do too. There's lots of room to kind of spread out. And then this part of town, or this kind of part of our area, doesn't have a lot of breweries already. So I think people are probably pretty excited about having a brewery spring up here.
Yeah, I think Andy and I were talking about working in Benton County up in Rogers at one point in our lives, and if you had told me back in 1989 that there would not only be liquor stores in Benton County, but an actual brewery coming into Benton County, I would have been skeptical, I think, even in that time period. What about you?
Yeah, we would have just said it just wouldn't happen, right? It was a dry county, and there just wasn't anything like that. I mean, there were private clubs. You could get a drink at a restaurant some places, but you had to kind of jump through hoops even to do that. So, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you just sign the name in the book, and they'd charge you some money so you could drink beer. So, Andy Coates, you're coming into a wide open area.
Yeah, it's obviously very exciting. I wouldn't say the cutting edge of anything, but to be kind of on the ground floor of just the craft beer movement here in Northwest Arkansas. We've obviously, all three of us have seen many, many changes. I've only been here just over 3 years, and in that 3 years, we've doubled the number of breweries in Arkansas. And our original plan was not even to be in Benton County. When we first moved here, it wasn't even an option. The wet dry vote wasn't even on the ballot yet, or even close. So just watching this process and watching people become very excited about what we have here in this area, and also obviously being one of the first people in Benton County is pretty exciting. We have people stopping in here on a very regular basis as they're driving by, because they've heard about where we are and just kind of want to come in and see the place, and they're excited we're here, and we're obviously very, very happy to be up here.
Yeah, there's not even a sign outside yet.
Nope, our sign's actually being made. It should be up hopefully by the end of next week or early the week after. So we're doing things nearly day by day. This place is changing. So our tanks, our fermentation and finished beer tanks, our bright beer tanks are coming in tomorrow. They shipped out from Washington State just about 4 days ago. And then our boiler is coming in on Tuesday. So by the end of next week, this place will start to fill up fairly quickly.
Talk about your system first of all.
Sure. We have I'd say a beautiful system. It's a 15-barrel pub brewing system. It's copper clad. It was built back in '96 out in Santa Rosa, California. And we were actually only the third owner. It was used for a year in Sonoma County, and then they went under, and it sat in storage for about 10. And then a great little brewery called Devil's Canyon, just southeast of San Francisco. They picked it up, and it was their workhorse for years. They just upgraded to a 30-barrel system this past winter, and we went out and got it in February. And so I think it's definitely got a lot of life left for sure.
And you've also got a little canning line as well.
Yeah, we do. We picked up a little cask canning line, little manual 2-head filler. We hadn't really planned on adding cans for a couple years into our business. Kind of wanted to start draft only, ease into it, see where the market went in terms of packaging. But the opportunity seemed right, and obviously here being in the Ozarks, it kind of represents a lot what we're trying to do with our brand and our beer. Obviously cans integrate very well into outdoor activities, into boating, into hiking, sporting events, things like that. So we thought being one of the, the first people in this area to offer cans, I know we're not the actual first, but there's not really a widespread market for cans, and it's starting to grow. So we pretty much fit into our business right now. So
where do you find brewing equipment like this? That's one of the questions that I've thought myself is, where do you latch onto this stuff?
So this brew house we actually found on a private, I guess, for sale website, classified website. Probrew.com is a great resource. I'm sure many of your listeners browse there and lurk in the dark corners looking for information and other equipment. That's usually the best resource, and I'd say that the best piece of advice I can say is have your cash ready. The canning line we got it a few weeks later than when we inquired. We inquired the day that the post went up, and it had sold in a matter of hours. That sale fell through, and the gentleman who sold it wrote 6 of us all in a mass email saying the first one that comes up with the cash gets it. And we replied to him within about 15 minutes, got him on the phone, and we got it. So especially in this market right now, things are going quickly. We kind of have, I guess, a mishmash of used equipment and brand new equipment. Like I said, we got some of our fermenters made out in Washington from Mark's Metalcraft and Design, some great folks doing great U.S.-made equipment. And then a few other of our tanks are coming from a friend of mine in St. Louis, a brewery. He's just upgrading to some larger equipment. So our walk-in cooler came out of an old grocery store. So it's really kind of just beating the pavement and trying to make some contacts and see who's upgrading before they even put it up on the internet or put it up for sale. So.
And then walk us around the grounds. I mean, virtually walk us around the grounds.
Sure. This building has had quite a storied past. It was built in the mid to late 70s. It's kind of seen Rogers change. This used to be more or less, I guess, out in the field. It sits on 2 acres. We think it's a great little spot. It's more of an industrial area town just south of the downtown Rogers area, just under a mile. The bike trail is going to be coming through here. We've got a soccer complex and a park expanding right in front of us, which is pretty neat to kind of watch the neighborhood change. Even since we've been here only since April, things are already starting to progress with all of that. We sit on 2 acres, like I said. It's ugly in all the right ways. If you go to many production breweries, they're not always in the nicest looking location, or the building might not look state of the art. But what we need, like Andy mentioned earlier, is space. We need space and some high ceilings. We have a loading dock coming in, and we hope to be adding a beer garden into next spring and into the summer, so we can have patrons sit outside and really kind of be more of, I guess, a part of this little spot as opposed to just being in a tasting room. So.
And we were talking, right now you're not going to have a kind of full-time, fully staffed tasting room. What's your strategy on that?
So kind of our strategy to start up is just kind of to grow organically and slow. We're not going to try to get into 100 places at once, and that kind of mirrors our same for our production area and our tasting room. So we're going to be open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then during the week for growler fills, kind of normal business hours. So if someone wants to stop in and get a growler to go on the way home from work, we'll be here. But on the weekends, we'll be open most every day and into the evening, so you can sit here and have a few pints or grab a growler or a 6-pack to go.
And what is your growth strategy? I mean, where are you going to start? I mean, if we look at, say, for example, Saddlebach, everywhere you go, you see, they've done a really good job of, market penetration. You see Saddlebach growlers, just about everywhere. So
yeah.
What's your strategy?
I'd say definitely. Obviously, Steve's done a great job of hitting the market and kind of breaking down some barriers for the rest of us, which is very great. Our market strategy is like I said before, kind of grow slowly. I've seen a number of breweries just in the market, not in this market, but just in the craft beer market in general, where they get everywhere, everyone loves their beer, they start to blow up, and then they can't support that growth with quality beer and the amount of beer necessary. So we have about 25 to 30 key accounts that we've kind of identified as people who already serve craft beer, are trying to serve more local beers. So we obviously want to work with them. We have some nice partners in the culinary field in the Bentonville and Rogers area that are really into local food already and supporting local farmers and whatnot, and we kind of think that we fit in as a local producer right into that same market. So we're going to be starting draft only, like I mentioned, and then adding packaging later on into our first year, and then kind of just see where it takes us. We're really wanting to focus on Benton and Washington County here in the Northwest Arkansas area, and then adding Madison and Carroll County. And so we're not trying to take over. Our overall 5 to 10 year goal is not to be in 15 states. If we stay just in Arkansas, I'd be very happy with that. I think that this market can support a lot of beer. Obviously, Central Arkansas, adding that as a secondary market for us down the road. But if you add, if you go a couple hundred miles from here, you have Tulsa, you have Joplin and Springfield, you've got the Little Rock, Fort Smith, Eastern Oklahoma. There's a fair amount of people that I feel are very underserved in terms of craft beer choices. So I think we'd be happy just staying around here and making some beer for the people in this area.
I'd be glad to drink some, would you?
I'm pretty excited about this. I know Andy's a great brewer, so I'm really looking forward to letting him, seeing how he kind of stretches his wings and gets to make some beers of his own.
When we talked to you before, you were the brewer at West Mountain, and we talked about you coming into the area wanting to start a brewery, but then being kind of the interim brewer there at West Mountain. Have you found that as an advantage to kind of introducing yourself into the area? Whereas if you'd come in just cold and tried to start a brewery, it seems like to me that you've had an opportunity to kind of get to know people, get to know the good beer people.
I'd say very much so. Obviously, working there at West Mountain with John, the owner there, has been nothing but an asset for us and for me myself. It's obviously. Working on a smaller system like that has kind of made me, I hope, into a better brewer. Recipe development has really become, I think, a lot stronger for me. I know what I like a lot more than I used to, and what I don't like in terms of process, in terms of ingredients. Obviously, the clientele there at West Mountain is a pretty loyal following of drinkers who come in at least every day, or if not every day, every couple of days. And the nice thing is you can sit down at the bar with people and get actual feedback. They'll be honest with you, which is very nice. And I think a lot of times production brewers, we're so separated from the market and from the people who are drinking our beer that sometimes we kind of lose sight of the fact that we may like it, but if other people don't, then what's the point? So we're trying to enhance everybody else's lives and have them enjoy our product. So the more we can do in terms of that, the better. So that's really helped. I wouldn't have met the two of you obviously as soon as I did, if not being there at West Mountain, which, just the smaller local beer community that's been growing here, being up there has really, really obviously improved.
So there are downsides, is what you're saying. Meeting us. Just a joke. What's your stable of beers going to be like?
We're going to come out with 4 beers to hit the market with. We're looking to launch an American Pale Ale. Kind of what I like to drink is more session beers. I know that's kind of a trendy thing right now and coming back around where people are trying to get away from super big, super hopped beers, super high alcohol beers. And there's a time and place for all those. I obviously enjoy those myself. But on a day-to-day basis, drinking a good, 4.5% to 5% beer that you can take to a barbecue or, go have a couple of as you're enjoying something outside, that's really kind of more my style right now. So we're going to come out with American Pale Ale. Is probably one of the first beers we'll put into a package. Obviously a nice, well-rounded American IPA. I think every brewery, at least when I go to a brewery and taste beers, I usually get one beer and then their IPA and usually stick there. Even if I try to get away from it and have a different game plan, it usually doesn't work. It's just one of those things. We like what we like no matter how hard we try. So a Pale Ale, and an American IPA, and then we're looking to add some Belgians into our lineup. That's something I think that not many people around here are really experimenting with. Some places you'll have maybe 1 or 2, but we kind of want to expose people to some different Belgian styles. One obviously that you guys have talked about before that I like to make is a saison. Just a really nice, easy drinking saison is hard to beat for me, especially in the hotter months down here in Arkansas. We're hoping to add some sort of, I wouldn't say a crossover beer. I don't really know if I like that term too much, but something that's a bit more accessible in terms of easy drinking, more along that session beer category. So we're kind of trying to figure out that one. I think there are a lot of wheat beers out right now. There are a lot of blonde ales out there right now that I don't think we want to compete with or need to compete with. I think people are making some pretty solid, light, drinkable beers. So I think we'll probably try to access the market in a different way, and we haven't figured that out yet. So it's going to be a work in progress. Like I said, we have those few beers in mind that we want to launch, and I think we're going to really listen to our consumers and see what sells well and what doesn't, and what people are really looking for, and what restaurants and bars kind of give us in terms of feedback, and kind of go from there.
We've got some empty glasses sitting here in front of us that I'd like to remedy, and in celebration of your canning line, I would like to.
Beautiful.
Describe what we're seeing here, Andy. What is this?
Well, that's a beautiful Miller Lite aluminum resealable pint.
And what do you think's in there? Not what's on the label.
It's a very cool package, though, to be honest with you.
So there you go. Andy, why don't you, Andy Sparks, why don't you open that up?
Crack the Miller Lite.
Yeah, let's see if it, okay, it didn't blow up. That's a good thing. But we featured this on the latest episode of Basic Brewing video. This is an experiment. I said I was going camping, and there were some of these around, and I said, you know what, I could use those.
That's a really good idea.
And so,
How do you get the paint off the can?
well, you put masking tape over the paint on the can.
There's still a little. Was this carbonated in the can?
Yeah, it
So
was batch primed. And cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers to you. Cheers. Thanks for coming.
Now this is I called it my spur of the moment saison. It has it's probably nothing like any saison that you've that you've ever had. Is it saisonish?
I'd say so. Yeah.
It does have. It has an interesting saison-like yeast character. I mean, that's one of the keys. I think when somebody says, "Hey, this is our saison," or "This is my saison," is I'm looking for that signature yeast profile thing. That's the kind of the most important. And then some dryness, but this has a little bit of that kind of funky kind of saison yeast.
Yeah, I'd say it finishes nice and dry, which, like Andy mentioned, is a signature characteristic. It's one of those things where you take a drink and it dries your mouth and your palate out, and you want to drink some more. So I'd have some more of this for sure.
Well, good.
It's delicious.
I'm relieved. Steve Wilkes said that it's just funky enough, but it's not like licking a pole in a barn, which could be it could be a lot of things. But this I call it my spur of the moment saison because it's got 9 pounds of 2-year-old, 1 pound of malted rye, and then it's got hollow tower for bittering, and then 1 ounce of Amarillo at 5 minutes before the end of the boil, and then 1 ounce of Mosaic at flame out, and with the Dan Star Bell saison yeast that we got free in our goodie bag at the homebrew conference. So,
were you happy with how this fermented in terms of the yeast? I've never used the dried saison yeast. I've heard good things, actually. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I've never used the yeast before either, and this is really the first time I've played with saison yeast. But it fermented. The basement was at 74 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, so it's fairly warm, and then it climbed up from there. And I got some feedback through Twitter that one of the brewers said that he didn't have very good luck with this particular yeast at higher temperatures, but I don't have any complaints.
Yeah, I've tried a couple other beers that were fermented with this yeast. I haven't brewed one yet myself because it's kind of a newer yeast that's been out there only for a little while. And both of those didn't have as much yeast character. And as this actually, I'm kind of surprised that it's the dry saison yeast. I'm encouraged to try it myself.
Definitely.
So we've had your saison at West Mountain, Andy Coates. Talk about your recipe and talk about the keys to getting the character. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. Awesome beer.
I think for me, I've kind of come back from, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, recipe development, where instead of trying to make everything complex and you use 3, 4, 5 hops and have a malt bill with 6 or 7 malts in it, I've really come back around to simple. So this beer, or that saison, was used Pilsen as a base malt, just a splash of Munich malt for a little color. And then hop-wise, it was a single hop using Sterling, which I had never used before, and it's one of my new, more favorite hops, I'd say. So obviously we mashed low to get that better attenuation, and then fermentation-wise, it was actually a blend of 2 different yeasts. It was not from Y Yeast or White Labs. It's a little guy out of the Bay Area named Jim Withy, Giga Yeast. I encourage you guys to check him out. He's kind of breaking into the homebrew scene, I think, with some smaller packaging. He does professional brewers right now in terms of supplying them with yeast. And what I really like about it is it ferments quickly. I know with some of the saison strains, like the DuPont strain, it tends to crank for a while and then slowly finish out. And sometimes you even have to add some other, a clean American ale yeast to kind of finish out that sugar and dry it out. His yeast is fantastic. Temperature-wise, we fermented, we started around 75, 76 and kind of let it free rise. And it free rose up to about 80 degrees. So it had some nice yeast character to it without getting those really stronger phenols or anything like that. So simplicity is, like I said before, is kind of what I'm coming back to, and you can make some really great beers with less ingredients. It's kind of what I've learned, and kind of try to keep that in the forefront of my mind as we move on to this venture. So,
and Andy Sparks, you preach about that as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I see a lot. And I get it. Young brewers just starting out, and they have this huge palette of flavors, and they try to build beers, and they just start throwing, a little crystal malt, a little honey malt, a little special B, a little chocolate, then pretty soon it's just muddy and, too much in one place. So, yeah, I encourage people to try to, simplify their recipes. And, there's a reason that the styles have all become so popular, because they've been honed over time. So, yeah, stick to the simple.
And I'm kind of surprised that you didn't mention wheat.
Oh, there is a splash of wheat. I put wheat in there for head retention, but in terms of a flavor additive, I used to use a very small amount, less than 1%. It's probably about 0.5% of just malted white wheat, just for some head retention. But yeah, that's a good reminder. Thank you.
Yeah, most of the recipes that I searched out there online and in books, the base is Pilsner malt and wheat. Mm-hmm. And I was concerned that maybe the two-row and the rye, maybe they wouldn't have, what the yeast wanted to make those nice, kind of spicy, funky flavors, but seems to have done well without it.
Yeah, I think the addition of the rye is a wise one. It probably adds to the spiciness of the beer.
Well, let's move on, shall we?
Open something else?
Yeah.
Another Miller Lite?
Yeah. No more novel packaging. This is, I asked your advice before. I've got an opener. I asked your advice because I wanted to make a mole beer, and you made one at West Mountain. So talk about that.
That beer actually, I kind of wanted to do something different. Obviously being in a pub setting and with the limited production amounts we could make there at West Mountain, we kind of wanted to have, some more choices for people. So I was thinking about ways I could take, a normal stout that we had and kind of do a couple kegs of just some one-off different flavors. So a good friend of mine, Phil Wymore at Perennial Artisan Ales up in St. Louis, he made a pretty big imperial stout that was aged with peppers and had the same kind of mole profile called the Braxis. Which is, if you guys can check that out sometime, I highly recommend it. So I called Phil up and said, "Hey, Phil, in terms of peppers you use, the amounts you use." Basically, he kind of gave me a baseline to start with. So we just started tinkering with kegs. So we used, we used dried ancho chili peppers. We used some raw organic cocoa nibs. We used a few vanilla beans, and then basically allowed that to sit in our base chocolate stout, which already had cocoa nibs and vanilla in it as well. So it kind of had a nice, right around 5.5–6%. So nothing too big, but it still had some, some sweetness to stand up there, and some body to stand up to those larger flavors as well. And the first one we did, the first time I tasted it, just tasted like burning. I was like, oh no, what have we done?
Tastes like burning.
So we poured a little bit more off, and what had happened is, the hop sack that we had aged it in had sunk obviously to the bottom, and we were sucking right through it. So getting some of those stronger flavors. So we blended back a little bit, did it in a corny keg, blended back, found that right happy medium of heat and smokiness and flavor, along with where you could still taste the beer. I guess that's one of my bigger pet peeves about fruit beers and, sometimes barrel-aged beers and anything with an additive, is that it can easily become overwhelming. Where you miss the beer and you don't taste that anymore, and you just taste whatever additive was there. Sometimes people use extract, and you can go from just the right amount to way too much very quickly. So like I said, dried ancho chilies, cocoa nibs, and vanilla, and let it sit in there in a nice, pretty stout, I'd say, and kind of let it go from there. So I'm excited to taste yours.
This is a 1 gallon batch that we did on the show, and this was done back in March. So it'd be interesting to see how it's changed over time.
It's interesting. It doesn't have a lot of head retention. And I was wondering if that was an issue you had as well with yours. Is it probably from the peppers?
It's probably from the oil and the peppers, yeah. We didn't really run into it. Obviously, being on a draft system, we could kind of up our pressure to almost over-carbonate a little bit. So it had a bit more bubbles to it. This does have a nice heat to it, though. It's one of those things where you don't want to taste spice and burning. You want to taste that heat in the back of your throat and the smokiness and a bit of the sweetness from the anchovies. But you still taste the beer. You still taste the chocolate and those dark roasted flavors of the stout. So,
I think that the cacao nibs and the vanilla bean probably had some oils in there as well. So that's a good observation, Andy. That the head is pretty much non-existent. But this is one that you and I looked at this recipe, and I'm going to scale it up into a 5-gallon batch. Is there anything that you guys would change?
You might add some additional wheat, something to add, something to help it have some more head retention. It tastes pretty darn good, just the way it is. Maybe a little thin. You might also adjust the mash temperature a little bit.
It's a little fruity.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if that's just through age, if that's kind of come through, or what kind of yeast did you use there?
The Safale SO4, which is
the
London ale yeast. So I think that's London ale yeast. So I plan on using the Safale USO5 with the next batch on the big batch, and I think that'll take some of that fruitiness down. But what do you think, Andy Coates? Would you change anything?
Like Andy mentioned, maybe increasing the body a little bit, and that could have something to do with just the mouthfeel. But overall, flavor-wise, I think it's very good. It has that balance between, like I mentioned before, the spice and the heat with, the flavors, the cacao nibs and the chocolate flavors and coffee roasted flavors you already have in the stout.
I think it's tasty.
Yeah. This would be a great beer to cook with, I think. If you were doing some chili or marinating some meat or some tofu or something, this could really pick up some cool flavors and kind of reduce it down. It might be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think yours was better, but I would expect that.
And this was one of those beers where I would like to sit down and have, 4, 5, 6 ounces of this. There were people there that would come in and drink glass after glass of it and just loved it. Where for myself, I can appreciate it and think it's delicious, but for me, I'm usually drinking something different. But it's fun. It's definitely fun to mess around, and it's nice when something that you just kind of come up with turns out better than you thought it would. So we all get lucky sometimes. That's for sure.
There's a song in there somewhere. Do we want to get weird, or do we want to taste the big beer? Do we want to switch?
I definitely want to get to that one. Doesn't matter. I guess we can just stay. That should be last, probably.
Okay. Well,
because it's a whopper.
This is an experimental beer. I haven't tried this yet.
Cool.
So this is a 100% rye beer. It was based on a recipe that I did last year, where I used rye, and I brought one of those. I don't know if I want to taste it on the record, since I did that with Ben over at Fossil Cove, but. That beer, the original 100% rye beer, was the mouthfeel was like cough syrup at the end of it, at the finished beer. And it was amazing because you could watch the bubbles. And even in this one, the bubbles are rising a little more slowly. So what I did was I halved the amount of rye. So this is only 2.5% beer.
Cool.
And this is a 2-gallon batch, 2 pounds of malted rye, half an ounce of Citra for bittering at 60 minutes, and half an ounce of Citra at 5 minutes with a US 05.
It's got a real pretty peach kind of aroma to it. I really like that.
Now, in terms of rye, did you use all malted rye? Did you use flaked rye?
Yeah, it's all malted rye. It's an all-grain beer. So, and I checked the conversion; it converted by itself.
Well, this would add body to any beer. This is very viscous.
And for being a 2.5% beer, you think it's going to be thin and watery, and it's definitely the opposite.
Ooh.
I don't think it's thin at all.
I kind of like this.
I do too, and I think this if I was going to make a session beer, I'm thinking, wow, I could kind of load it up with a little of this rye and make it a satisfyingly drinkable beer, whereas a lot of times the really small session beers can end up being a little thin, and you kind of miss that in it.
And the color is deceiving as well. It's obviously very, very light colored, straw colored, and you think it's not going to taste like much. But there's a nice the Citra. I don't know. It's really good.
Look at the bubbles the bubbles are. It looks like they're kind of in slow motion. Even in this low gravity beer, and it started off at 10.26.
Cool.
Man, I'm pretty happy about this.
Yeah, I drink this every day.
You know, I've been looking for satisfying low gravity beers, and this one, I would recommend that.
Of course, it's a difficult beer for like a pro would have difficulty making this. You do this because you can do brew in a bag and you can just lift the entire grain bed out of your pot and drain it. Whereas a professional brewer, this would gunk up the works pretty badly.
You'd be sitting there all night trying to run this off, and it probably would never work, no matter how many rice holes you put in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that's one thing that I like about it is this is a beer that is exclusively in the domain of homebrewers.
For sure.
I mean, I've read. I think it was. I mean, you can do a Google search and prove me wrong, but I think it was Bear Republic that actually did a 100% rye production beer, but I don't know how big the batch was. And I read that rice hulls were used liberally in that. But Andy's
mine's gone.
Yours is all gone.
No, I want to go home and brew a batch of beer. I'm kind of excited.
That's really good.
And that it really shows off the hops.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get? I mean, you probably have more experience with rye. A lot of times where they say what you get from rye is like a spiciness.
Sure.
Do you taste the rye in this beer?
I'd say, to me, obviously you can get the spiciness from it. For me, rye really comes through in terms of dryness, where it really rounds out the palate at the end. It finishes. Obviously, you can do that through your mash temperature and through the attenuation of the yeast, eating the sugars, and then obviously hopping-wise, you can dry it out. But for me, whenever I drink a rye beer, what really comes through to me is that really dry finish, like I mentioned earlier, that leaves you wanting more and coming back for another sip. There's definitely some spice to this. I mean, this is not what I expected it to be at all. It's really cool.
So I don't know how many, I do get feedback from brewers who say, yeah, I tried to play, I played with 100% rye, and they talk about the stickiness. But I think if you've done 100% rye beer in the past and it has come out like cough syrup, try it again.
Yes.
Back off on the. Are you curious about the? Are you curious about the other?
Sure.
You want to drink some cough syrup beer?
Well, no, but we will certainly try it.
This is the original batch. This is the last bottle in existence.
Wow.
I only bottled 3 because the beer was so weird in the fermenter. I mean, it didn't really settle out in the fermenter, and it was this gloppy, syrupy mess. And I thought, Steve and I bottled it, and I thought, I guess we ought to bottle some of it just to see what happens. But I don't want to, work to bottle 2 gallons of this. So take a look at that.
The bubbles almost don't even rise.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Oh, he spilled some.
It's a brewery.
But look at the head on that.
It's beautiful. It almost looks like oil.
Somebody should take a picture. Andy, you're the designated photographer. Andy Sparks.
Did you change the hops at all in this beer?
Ooh. Yeah, this is Amarillo.
Okay.
I think this is like an ounce of Amarillo for bittering, and then half an ounce of Amarillo at 60 minutes, half an ounce of Amarillo at 5 minutes. So same amount of hops, different. But
I've never seen that before. It's cool.
It's fun. But it's a beautiful beer.
Oh, gorgeous! Yeah.
It just looks like it's in slow motion.
It's like syrup. It's like you're drinking malt syrup, except it's not sweet like malt syrup would be.
And it doesn't have the dryness the other one does. It doesn't have that finish that leaves you coming back.
I brewed this in May of last year, 2012. But it's not horrible.
No.
It's just you can't think of sitting and drinking a pint of it.
No.
It's kind of like Robitussin or something.
It tastes better than cough medicine.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't taste bad at all, actually. It's just hard to get over the mouthfeel is so huge.
Yeah, I didn't give Ben any kind of a heads up on what he was drinking. I just, here, drink this.
You just surprised him.
Yeah, and the expression on his face, because he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Even the foam seems different. The foam seems thick. If you just grab some of that without the beer, it's that's a new one for me as well.
But that's a dramatic example of what rye brings to your beer.
Sure.
I mean, if you think of what your, what if I add a pound of rye to, say a 1050 pale ale, what does that give me? And obviously, it's going to bring body. But again, do you taste the rye spiciness? I mean, are you getting a rye character? If someone told you that was rye, would you know?
I probably wouldn't know personally. I'd say that the Citra one definitely had more of that rye character than this one does. And it could be so much that we're focusing on the body of it and the viscosity that you're distracted by that and you miss everything else.
Right. Yeah, I would say that if you wanted to experiment with a good proportion of like a pale ale, if you want your pale ale to have more body, you could try that. I don't think you would pick it up unless you tell people you're doing it, right? And there's no rule that says you have to tell everybody everything that's in your beer, right? So they can wonder why your beer is so much better than theirs.
And again, you can make a pale ale and back off on the amount of base malt that you use and replace it with rye, get the body, reduce the alcohol and the calories, and get a more satisfying session beer out of it. So cool. There you go. It's an odd duck.
Was this the same alcohol percentage in terms of everything pretty similar?
No, this was 1055. This started off at 1055, so it's twice as much malted rye, 4 pounds of malted rye. So all it did basically was just halve the amount of rye, and it was weird. It was really weird, and even in the lighter gravity 100% rye beer, where you stick the immersion chiller in and you turn it on and you immediately get like a protein break, and then you leave it and it settles out. It didn't settle out. It's almost like it had a protein break in the fermenter because there was just this cloud of stuff in there. And then eventually it's an odd thing, but tasty. Should we finish with the big boy? So, what do we got here, Andy?
So this is a beer that's familiar to Basic Brewing listeners in the past. A year or so ago, we got a bourbon barrel and decided we wanted to start and put our first beer in. It was going to be an imperial stout with steel cut oats, so we've talked about it a couple different times on the show. Anyway, this is the finished product. This has been carbonated in a keg, and then I've bottled up some so that we could share it together tonight. But the homebrew club in town has gotten to indulge in it a couple times, and they were all pretty pleased with it. So anyway, without further ado,
this had a ton of oats, and we debated on whether it was necessary to do a cereal mash or not. And instead of doing a traditional cereal mash where you mix in base malt with the adjunct, all Andy did was he just cooked it overnight, and we just we separated the mash into two parts and mashed. How was it? 3 pounds of oats. 3 pounds of oats with 10 pounds of two-row, and did a separate mash with that, and did brew in a bag there. So we wouldn't have to worry about a stuck sparge with all those oats, and it converted. We tested it with iodine, and it converted just fine. Didn't need the cereal mash in that way. Oh my goodness! And this has been in the barrel.
Yeah, it only spent a couple weeks in the barrel, and being the small barrel we expected, and a brand new barrel, we expected to impart a lot of aromatic qualities to the beer. And so we only put it in there for a couple weeks, and then we parked it in glass carboys, probably for longer than we should. But
people get busy.
Well, it's a gorgeous beer, beautiful tan head. You stick your nose in here and it just knocks you off your feet. It's fantastic. That's really good.
Oh my goodness.
It turned out pretty good.
My eyes rolled all the way back in my head and then came around the bottom and then came and wow. Oh my goodness.
It's like a chocolate candy or something. It's just yeah.
Yeah, you smell it and you get wood when you smell it. And a little bit of bourbon, and then you think it can't taste any better than that, and you taste it and it's like, it tastes better than that. Holy smokes.
I mean, not just saying this because you guys are sitting here, but this is better and more balanced than many commercial examples of bourbon aged beers that are out there. A lot of times they can be super hot or way too much bourbon character, or the beer going in wasn't good to start with, and bourbon can hide some of that, but it's not going to cover all of it up, where this is really good.
I don't think it's immodest if I say that I agree that a lot of times when you see the word bourbon barrel on the label, a lot of times when you drink something, you taste table leg, and it's like chewing on some wood that's been soaked in bourbon. But this is way more complex with that. I mean, I'm going to sit with this little sample, this third of a bottle, and I'm going to let it warm up, and I'm just going to enjoy it. And
you'll get more alcohol perception, I think, when you warm it up. I mean, this was a huge beer to start with, right? We fermented it for a couple weeks in the stainless fermenter, and then we racked it into the barrel for 2 weeks, and then we parked it in glass and let it sit in a refrigerator for a few months until it was ready to carbonate.
It almost has like vanilla tobacco, that kind of flavor to it. Yeah, this is really good. So you get all those big flavors up front, but they don't, but it finishes completely different from when it starts, which is neat. It's a complex beer for sure.
Wow. Like I say, I like big beers, and I cannot lie. That's those other brewers just can't, Wow.
Were you worried at one point that you let it sit too long?
Yeah, it sat in some carboys, right? And we had, it was in 3 carboys. We put 4 gallons into 2 carboys, and then we had a little bit left. Parked it that was from the original batch that didn't actually get aged in oak. We put that in a 3rd carboy, and that one, unfortunately, the one that hadn't been through the barrel, its airlock went dry and I didn't realize it, and so it ended up having kind of an oxidized character to it. So we didn't blend any of it back. I just threw that out, and but the stuff that stayed in the glass carboys, their airlocks never dried out, and it ended up tasting great. And we tasted both of them, and then before we went ahead with it.
Very nice job.
Yeah.
Good job, Andy. You were the chief brewer on the project, so it was in your brew house. So we've got enough back patting to go around. Well, this has been fun. We usually don't do just beer tasting, beer drinking shows, but I did want to get your input on those styles, Andy Coates, and because you do such good work, and I know that you've got some expertise to lend, and I really can't wait till you get this place up and running. And welcome to the neighborhood.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming by for sure, obviously, and you're welcome anytime. And we're obviously very excited. This has been a long time coming for us, about 3.5 years throughout the process of writing our business plan and raising money and actually starting the construction and finding equipment and getting everything installed. So we couldn't be happier to be here and be a part of what's going on here in Arkansas. And cheers to you guys. Thanks for coming.
Cheers. Andy Coates from Ozark Beer Company. Andy Sparks from thehomebrewery.com. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, James.
What a fun day. Don't usually do, just sitting and drinking and tasting shows, but that was pretty fun. Thanks again to the Dueling Andys. Andy Coates tells me today, I texted with him today, he says he'll probably be brewing next week. He says they're finishing up the electrical work there in the brewery. Can't wait to see the place in operation. Man, that's going to be fun. I just wish it were next door instead of a county away, but oh well. Andy's a good brewer. Lots of good stuff. Both Andys, really good brewers. So, anyway, fun day. If you have, just thinking about tasty beers. If you have brewing questions, in that pause that I took there thinking about tasty beers, I could have read a letter. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com. I will correspond back to you, even though I don't read the letters on the show, but I will. Or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Please don't tell us where you're from. How many times have I read this? Don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our Basic Brewing growler bags are available in our shop. Protect your precious homebrew and craft beer as you take it from place to place. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to our podcasts. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. We got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store too. Our logbooks are on the store as well. Keep track of up to 50 batches of beer. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link or bookmark, however you get there. We greatly appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Elenco Electronics LP560 Logic Probe. That's what Todd bought. Hope Todd doesn't mind me saying that he bought a Logic Probe. And Spark Fun Inventor's Kit, version 3. We've got a 13-year-old son that would love to play with that. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. And don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine, BYO magazine, through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. I'm not tipsy, I'm just hungry. It's time for lunch. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Hungry? Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.